other member of parliament. I think there is a TLP meeting, so that's why they must be stuck and there is a long queue. But that is not my fault, and I can't shorten it either, because the security system in parliament has become tough and tough. I came to this country as a political refugee in 1981, June the 12th. And I think on July the 7th, first time I met Tony Benn at 12 Holland Park Avenue. The reason was when I started my journey from Pakistan, and I was absconding for 6 months in Pakistan, and Ziaul Haq, whose meeting was held last week here for his coup, and unfortunately Aitzaz couldn't make it, but he's here today to speak on Tony Benn, and he might mention Ziaul Haq in his speech. I was absconding from him, and I had a small bounty on my head. I think nowadays bounty is on 100 million, 50 million. I wish it was that sort of heavy bounty on my head. I might have asked one of my brother or sister to catch me and give it to them and get the money to become rich people in Pakistan. But I knew Tony Benn when I started my journey from Pakistan, because a lot of trade unions mentioned me, that there is a man of principle, a man who stands for human rights, a man who stands for principles and equalities in the world. So I came here, I contacted him. There was no website during those days, there was no mobile phone, so I simply rang a number 0207 229 0779. And my number was 0207 229 1469. So it was very convenient to speak to each other, because we lived almost 200 yards away from each other. And I think if I tell you whole story, nobody else will be able to speak tonight, and you would have to stay here for another couple of days. So I won't. I'll just give you few. So since then, he introduced me to ILO, to ITF, to the parliament where we are sitting today, to his family as well. I met Steve when he stood in 80s as a member of GLC. I met many, and many others. Sonia Bede, you can come here, and I think Chaudhry Sahib can come here, because you have traveled all the way from Denmark, Copenhagen. So it is good to see you. Come in, sit next, and Majid, you can join as well. So I think the journey started from there, and it ended with a great sadness in March when I was in Lahore, and I received a phone call from a gentleman from Slough, and he said Tony Benn has passed away, and I couldn't stand up because I met him last in December in Kensington Town Hall, which I introduced him, although his wife Caroline was a regular goer there, because she was a parent governor in Holland Park School for many, many years. And I met her many times. My longest days of meeting Tony Benn, staying with him, were 3-4 times. And once it was when I took him on 6th of May 2007 to Wilson Town Hall, and there are quite few people, including Abdul Bhatt from Wilson area, Iqbal is sitting here, and he went there on a May Day organized by World Labour Organization. And all the speakers were speaking in Urdu, and he was sitting on the top chair as a chief guest and was clapping with me when I was clapping, and he has said it in his book, which is here, and she's going to read it, whole story. And he said, I never knew, but I was committed to friendship of Mushtaq Lasharie, and I went there. And the second time was in 2011, when South Asian Forum of Bradford was trying to call him to come to Bradford many times, but he couldn't go, he was always busy, and he couldn't go, so they asked me, can you bring him here? And I rang him, and he said, Mushtaq, how long it will take? I said, maximum 12 hours. And actually there was my personal sort of thing in it, that I wanted to spend those 12 hours with him. He said, fine, I will come by train and I will come back by train, because he used to travel on his own, and he will never depend on anybody else, because he will always be early. He will be early half an hour, 45 minutes, wandering around in the meeting room, and that is what I think Hilary and his family members have learned from him. They are always on time. He said, I will be there at 7 o'clock, and he was there at 7 o'clock. So I think we picked him up at midday. He said, pick me up at midday and please try to drop me back at midnight because I have to write what I've done the whole day and he will not sleep before 2 o'clock. So Mahmood, whose poem will be read by Dr. Victoria Goddard in a minute, and myself and my son Chi, I don't know where is he, he's supposed to be here any minute. So he became the driver, volunteered that I want to drive him. So we picked him up at midday, 12 o'clock. We took him to Brentford, and we promised that we will drop you back at 12 o'clock. And whole day I was sitting with him at the back seat, and we were discussing the world politics and everything. And that was, I think, my luckiest and most best day in my life till today. Maybe I get another person, but I don't see that happening, but that was my best day. And when we came back, his one comment that I will never forget. When we were coming back, we got late. You know, the Pakistani functions, they start late, they end late, and there are so many speeches that I think somebody has already mentioned in newspapers, that there are 40 people sitting there and there are 60 speeches. So we will make sure that today it doesn't happen. Half of you will speak today. So we went there and it was late. So my son drove a little bit faster than usual. When we stood down, the one comment which I will remember of my life was, Tony came up and when he was saying goodbye to everybody in front of 12 Holland Park Avenue, he said, I think today I'm being driven by F1 driver. And that was it. That was the whole day comment on the driving. He didn't say you are driving fast or you are driving too quickly, but he was trying to make sure that he's there at midday. So I think that was an amazing day. I met, as I mentioned you, I introduced him to Town Hall. He has already mentioned it in his book. I think 7 times he mentioned how he was introduced to Kensington Town Hall. He was a regular at our meetings, and Professor Victoria Goddard will speak on it. I don't want to say too much. But the saddest thing was that on this weekend, I was in Durham Miners Gala. And Tony has been going there for 70 years. And I tell you, for past 8 years, I will sit with him because he knew me and I knew him, and we have done it over the Labour Party conferences as well. And people will come get his autographs, and I'm sitting there. He was becoming a little bit, I think he was listening loud. So when people speak very softly, he will ask me what he has said, and I will repeat it. And then I will take him to the platform where he used to sit in the corner chair, and I made sure that Rotary bigger staff sit on that chair, and I told him, look, we are missing Tony when we don't want to miss you next time. So carry on fighting, and he is going to fight. So I think we will remember Tony. I have attended his hundreds of memorial meetings. The last one was on 5th of June, which I attended in Camden Town Hall, and there were over 1,000 people there, and I'm expecting Jeremy and others to come and speak about him. Let me finish here. This is a sad day for us that we don't have Tony Benn with us. We are looking for another Tony Benn. We have not found yet. I hope we can get one in this century who can stand for equality, who can stand for human rights, who can stand for oppressed people. And I think when people ask me what Third World Solidarity has achieved, I tell them that in 2007, Hilary, Benn, son of Khalid and Jeremy, son of Tony Benn, came to our meeting in Atlee Suite, and he promised, which Third World Solidarity has been campaigning for years, that we want resolution of United Nations to be fulfilled, that 0.7% of GDP should be paid as a development fund to the third world country. Hilary promised that, and this government has committed to it, and they have achieved it. So I think Third World Solidarity, one achievement you can say that we have achieved 0.7% of GDP to be given for development of third world countries. And the second achievement is that we raise the voice of voiceless people. And I will just tell you a very important message which I have received from Ethiopian community. Their opposition leader and Secretary General of their opposition was kidnapped, abducted on 23rd of June by Yemeni's government in collaboration with the Ethiopian government, and he is taken to Ethiopia. He's a British citizen. I know Jeremy Corbyn is leading his case.
He's back in
Thank you very much mentioning that. So we, the Third World Solidarity, is proud to raise the voices of those who are forgotten or who are lost in our normal lives. So let's carry on it. That was Tony Benn's mission, and Third World Solidarity will fulfill it. Can I ask you to, I think, stand for 1 minute in the memory of Tony Benn, and then I will invite her. Thank you very much. I know the meeting has been changed from Wilson Room, so I think there are a lot of people outside. But if, Yasir, can you keep an eye? G, can you keep an eye outside if there is somebody who's wandering around? Ask them the meeting is here. Thank you. Can I ask, there will be 1 or 2 interventions? No, one, and then I'll call Khalid because he has to go to another meeting. Barrister Huma Price is going to read. She is a member of Executive Committee and Secretary of Third World Solidarity Executive Committee. Is going to read because Dave Anderson is not well and he couldn't make it, but he has asked us to read a very brief message of him as a chairman of Third World Solidarity, APPG. Barrister Huma Price.
Thank you, Mushtaq. It's a message from Dave Anderson. It starts, Comrades, I'm truly sad that I can't be with you tonight. This weekend has seen the great turnout at Durham Miners' Gala, and for the first time in half a century, Tony wasn't among us. He loved Durham and all it stood for, and I am so proud that he was an honorary member of the Durham Miners Association. But he was so much more, a visionary, an inspiration, and a light in the darkness. We may never see his like again, which would be a tragedy for future generations. You meet tonight as internationalists who believe that we are all the same despite our ethnic, cultural, or political origins, and Tony would say aye to that. Please remember my comrade fondly tonight, and in his memory, carry on your work in his name. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know Khalid Mahmood, Member of Parliament from Bury Paw, Birmingham, has kindly accepted to come here for a few minutes. I know he has got another commitment at 7 o'clock. He's already a few minutes late. So can I ask Khalid Mahmood to speak on the memory of Tony Benn?
Thank you very much, Mr. Lasharie. Welcome to Ahsen, who has a great light in Pakistan in very difficult circumstances that it's going through at the moment. And we need more people like him to shine that light. It is important to have those people who understand the issues of legality and the rights of people to press that. So very welcome to you. Right Honourable Hilary Benn, a great colleague and a friend, somebody who also is following in the great footsteps of his father. And just to say a few words about the great Tony Benn. Tony, from a very early age when I joined the Labour Party, was always somebody that we aspired to, somebody that we looked up to, because he always spoke for the interest of those who weren't able to speak for themselves. That showed me what the Labour Party stood for in my early years of being in the Labour Party, because I believe thoroughly that was what the Labour Party was about. It was about looking at the equality, looking at justice for people who were not able, perhaps in some terms, to look after their own interests and to do that. And as I became more and more involved in the Labour Party and in politics, and the further higher you go up, you tend to sometimes slip away from those great words and the principles of Tony Benn. But I think it was always interesting, as far as I was concerned, that there was some lever that always pulled you back. Because whenever he spoke, he guided you back to where you should be, as a Labour politician, as a socialist in this country, who understood what the meaning of the word being a socialist was, and what the Labour Party stood for. And sometimes when it didn't quite stand for what it should have stood for, he let us all know where the party should be, and we all had to at least listen and take heed of some of the words he was saying. He's a great man, and may he rest in peace. I don't think any of us can emulate what he's done, but we need more of those free thinkers who are able to ensure that we stick to our principles. And a huge tribute to Tony Benn and what he gave me personally in terms of guidance throughout the Labour Party, being a member of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Khalid Mahmood. Professor Victoria Goddard is a member of Executive Committee of Third World Solidarity. Sandra Settley, who is the chairwoman of Third World Solidarity, and met Tony Benn in 1986 when we were having British Commission on War Crimes of first Gulf War of 1991. And I met Sandra, and I met Hugh Stephen, and I met Ramsey Clark, and I met Sheikh Rashid Baba, Socialism of Pakistan, who were attending that meeting in north of London. And I think she couldn't attend this meeting today, and she's very saddened. She was virtually crying day before yesterday because she had to go to a press trip to Paris, and she interviewed Tony 3-4 times. And then her daughter, Tatiana, Dr. Tatiana Settley, who lives in USA and has written a stage play on Miliband's, also interviewed Tony Benn with my reference for about 1 hour. She couldn't be here, but she has requested one of her best friend and professor of anthropology and member of Third World Solidarity Executive Committee, Professor Victoria Goddard. She will be speaking on behalf of Third World Solidarity tonight. So can I ask Victoria to speak?
Thank you. May I be allowed 1 or 2 comments on that as well? Thank you. In fact, my association with Third World Solidarity is more recent than Tony Benn's relationship with the organization. But as Mushtaq Lasharie has said, his link and his support for Third World Solidarity goes to the very origin of the organization. And what a champion we have had in Tony Benn. His ideals are humbly reflected in the ideals of Third World Solidarity, the ideals of internationalism, of democracy as a full participatory and indeed a radical project, equality and rights. And as Mushtaq has said also, the question of those people whose voices are not normally heard. And I think this is where also it's my personal view, but I think I speak for my colleagues. When Tony Benn spoke, he was, of course, articulate, he was clear, he was passionate, but he also always informed. When you heard Tony Benn speak, you learned something. He was drawing on history, and I think this is a really important lesson, not only because history has lessons which are not transparent and they're not easy to learn, but they're there for us to think about and move forward. And I think not only do we learn from the histories, which are again the histories of those that become invisible, the other histories, the histories that don't always get into the public domain and the history books, and increasingly possibly there is a risk of this, but the importance of learning from the past. And also within that, this ability to have a broad brush of history and a broad brush of the world, of understanding the complexities of the world we live in, while at the same time paying a lot of attention to the minutiae of everyday lives, everyday people, and their struggles were as important as the big events in history. And I think this is a lesson that is an enduring lesson. And so in a way I would like to just reflect on another issue which is related to Third World Solidarity, which is that of legacy. Tony Benn's legacy, but also I think our vision is to transmit values and knowledge and understanding and an enthusiasm for action and participation amongst the young. And so I have one event that Mushtaq Lasharie was reminding me of today, which was 3 years ago, an event organized by Third World Solidarity for the under-25s. And all the speakers were young people. And it was to commemorate the 9/11. And Tony Benn was sitting in the back row, and Mushtaq Lasharie, seeing him, invited him to come forward and maybe say something And as I understood it from you, he said, this time I'm listening, I'm here to listen. And that reminded me also, he became an honorary graduate at Goldsmiths where I teach. And I remember walking into the field after the ceremony where all the students had received their diplomas. And there he was, surrounded by students and their families, grandmothers, and talking as though these were long-lost friends. And indeed, maybe they were long-lost friends. So this ability to listen, I think, the humility of listening and paying attention to ordinary people, to everyday lives, and I think that's, again, something that we can transmit to the next generation. So, finally, this event that Mushtaq Lasharie has referred to, which is also to do with listening and with respect and with understanding. There's no way we can go forward in understanding or dialogue unless we learn to listen. And this is, I think, an excellent example of Tony Benn's ability to do it with enormous grace and panache. This was an event in Wilston Green, as you mentioned, and one of the things that impressed me as a member of the audience, I didn't understand much of what was going on either, but that he was also honoured in that event, and he was given a traditional Sindhi ajrak, which is a beautiful cloth which was bestowed on him as an honour and which he accepted and acknowledged with great, I think, gratitude and again, elegance. And so I'm going to read from his own diaries. This is More Time for Politics, highly recommended. And this is an entry on Sunday the 6th of May. In the evening, I went to the May Day celebrations at the Pakistani Centre up in Wilston Green. There were about 150 people there. I sat on the platform and I didn't really know who they were, which is so difficult. And then most of the meeting was conducted in Urdu. And I sat and clapped when other people clapped and looked wise. I'm going to take my glasses off, my eyesight's not what it used to be. There was one beautiful poem read by author Mahmood, who's a filmmaker and makes programs for Channel 4. And this is the poem. You want to speak of war, I want to speak of peace. You say punish, I say forgive. You speak of God's wrath, I speak of his mercy. Your Quran is a weapon, my Quran is a gift. You speak of the Muslim Brotherhood, I speak of the Brotherhood of man. You like to warn others, I like to welcome them. You like to speak of hell, I like to speak of heaven. You talk of lamentation, I talk of celebration. You worship the Lord, I worship the divine. You want silence, I want music. You want death, I want life. You speak of power, I speak of love. You search out evil, I want the good. You dream of the sword, I sing of the rose petal. You say the world is the desert, I say the world is a garden. You prefer the plain, I prefer the adorned. You want to destroy, I want to build. You want to go back, I want to move forward. You are busy denying, I am busy affirming. Yet there might be one thing on which we see eye to eye. You want justice, so do I.
Mahmood is in Karachi, and this is his poem from his Sugar-Coated Pills, and he's a member of Third World Solidarity Executive Committee. So this was important that we mention it. Can I now, obviously there will be, can I mention here 2-3 people? Obviously in 2011, Tony Benn accepted a small, brief token of award from Third World Solidarity, and that it was the 4th one in history of Third World Solidarity. The previous 3 were given, one to Dr. Amir Majid, who is sitting on my right, who is a blind man, done 3 PhDs in law on human rights, and he teaches in London University. He also is a senior appellate judge. He handed over that award to Tony Benn, and Tony Benn was very pleased to receive it with Ali Ismail Abbas, who lost his both arms at the age of 9 and lost his whole family and lives in London now, 22-year-old young man from Iraq. And the third award was given to Tony QC barrister Sigmund Qadri. So Tony Benn was the fourth one which was given to him, and he never accepted any awards or any award. But when I requested him that this humble token sort of gesture for your work on human rights and democracy, he accepted it, and we were very honored. So can I give another hand to Dr. Amir Majid, who has come here. Thank you very much, Dr. Can I now invite my great friend, comrade, and can I also congratulate Sonia Khan for getting the degree from, is it UCL? City University on, is it PhD on psychology? So can we give a big hand? And my good friend, and I mentioned already that their organization, Stop the War Coalition, held a memorial meeting on 5th of June in Camden Town Hall. I was there, Melissa spoke there, and many other members of the family were there. So I thought I'm not late if I hold it on 14th of July. So we are not late, but I want to announce another thing, and obviously Jeremy and Hilary will help me doing it. I want to start, on behalf of Third World Solidarity, an annual lecture on Tony Benn on our anniversary, which is around 10th of April, to start it next year. I want to request Aitzaz Ahsen to come and give us that lecture of 45 minutes to 50 minutes, and we will arrange in central London, inviting 200 to 250 people. I hope you are able to come. Possibly we will invite you in Kensington Town Hall, which was the favorite one of Tony Benn after he was introduced to it. So let's see if he can make it, and family and Jeremy Corbyn and other friends approve it. We will start it around 10th of April. It will be after 10th, because I think Easter Monday is just 1 week before, so we don't want to do it too close to that. So we'll do it around 15th or 17th or 16th. Can I invite Jeremy, who is the president of Stop the War Coalition? And I think I'm missing another thing, and I would like you to speak on it. Afif Safia, who wanted to come and especially came all the way from Palestine to speak tonight, somehow he has a food poisoning. Is it right, Yasser Abbas? Yeah. He has just sent a text to Yasser Abbas, who was working with me on this event, that he can't make it. So if you can speak not only on behalf of yourself, but as a president of the Stop the War Coalition, and speak about Palestine today, which Tony Benn would have spoken if he was here today. Jeremy Corbyn.
Mushtaq, thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me to say some words tonight. And it's a great honour to be invited to do that. And I think it's great that Hilary is here, and I think Hilary should be speaking first, actually. But you're being held to the last, are you, Hilary?
Not quite.
In memory of Tony, it's actually quite difficult to summarise so much of what he did in internationalism, and of all the different groups he supported, and the ways he was able to inspire large numbers of people to undertake tasks they hadn't hitherto thought they could do. And his support for this group was very strong indeed, and I think one of the greatest events was when you had Noam Chomsky speaking here. And it seemed to me that there is a generation of people, Tony, Noam Chomsky, Ben Bella, many others, who've given a huge contribution, not just to the principles of international solidarity and justice, but also their ability to communicate across generations, across nationalities and across language, which is something that Tony was spectacularly good at doing. As you mentioned, Mushtaq, in introducing me, I'm chair of Stop the War Coalition, but I'm also chair of Liberation. And it's in that capacity I want to say a word first. Britain is obviously a former imperial power, and there's an awful lot of imperial pretentiousness about attitudes in the Foreign Office and foreign policy, and indeed pervade this building to this day. And we also have a legacy of issues that Britain and its colonial past has created around the world, Palestine being just one of them. In the 1920s and 30s, there was a huge debate in the labour movement about whether or not there should be the idea of dominion and self-governing status for British colonies that would essentially remain part of Britain, or whether there should be a move towards independence. The French debate was even more intense, and they moved very strongly towards making overseas territories a département of France. Britain, generally speaking, didn't, but that debate nevertheless went on. The turning point in the thirst for independence was the Pan-African Unity Conference at Chorlton-cum-Hardy Town Hall in 1945 in Manchester, when many African leaders, all of whom went on to become leaders of their own countries, forged an alliance calling for self-government and then independence for mainly at that time African colonies. Remember, Britain was going through a period of the most unbelievable treble standards. The first standard was the good one, and that was the very good domestic policy that the post-war Labour government had on National Health Service, public ownership, council housing, so many things. The bad side of it and the good side of it in the foreign policy. There was an undertaking that independence would come to India. Unfortunately, that was accompanied by a partition, which of itself is a huge debate. But there was also the predilection of that government to engage in colonial wars in Kenya and in many other places. And the brutality and the behaviour of the British Armed Forces in Kenya, not just Kenya, but many other places, was absolutely appalling. Many who had were on the left of the Labour Party and had indeed supported the Attlee government in its domestic policy but been critical of its foreign policy, and particularly of the foundation of NATO, such as Fenner Brockway and others, came together in 1954 to found the Movement for Colonial Freedom. And Tony was there at the foundation meeting. Fenner Brockway was there and many others, and Tony was Movement for Colonial Freedom's first treasurer. And he performed those duties very well, and the Movement for Colonial Freedom grew very quickly and was an important factor in pressurising MPs and pressurising the British government and supporting independence movements in Africa. And in particular, what was happening in Kenya, where the Mau Mau rebellion was taking place. The British media, I remember growing up with this as a small child, were full of stories about Mau Mau atrocities and Mau Mau abuse, and how every European was at risk in Kenya. It was a travesty of the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation was that British colonial forces were desperate to hang on to the land and the power in Kenya, and the British Army was supporting them in doing that, and of course it suited them therefore to pillory all those that were calling for independence. Tony, as a Member of Parliament, quite a young Member of Parliament at the time, very bravely, along with a very small number of others, raised the issue of the treatment of Mau Mau people in concentration camps organised by the British Army. And then fast forward, last summer, which is what, 60, 70 years later, the British Foreign Secretary gets up in Parliament and comes within a scintilla of giving a general apology for the behaviour of British forces. Why? Because of the campaign of the Mau Mau people for justice, and it was a sort of poignant moment. I was in the High Court with them when they actually were presenting their case and indeed won their case in the High Court. These are people that have been disgracefully treated by the British Army. And amongst the information given were pamphlets produced by MCF, Movement for Colonial Freedom at the time, Liberation as it now is, and of course the speeches and questions raised by Tony and many others in Parliament at that time. So there's this idea that Tony came to internationalism and international politics much later in his life is simply not true. Hilary, I'm sure, will confirm this. It was always there. It was always there from his experiences in the Second World War, from the loss of his brother, and his utter faith in the principles of the United Nations Charter and universal human rights. I have this memory of meeting, well, I met Tony obviously many years ago, when I was first elected here, getting to know Fenner Brockway quite well, and I always liked Fenner because however old I was, he always called me young man. I thought, well, great, anyone that keeps calling somebody young man has got to be a nice chap. And Fenner and Tony were fascinating to talk to. I was a newly elected member, and I just wished I'd carried a camera with me. These days everybody has a camera for everything. That in the Riverside cafeteria, members area of the cafeterias used to be, I took my young son Ben, who was then about 6 to 9 months old, into the room, and he was being a complete pain. He wouldn't shut up. He was howling and crawling around and getting on my nerves. And like any young father, he was getting deeply stressed by this child's misbehaviour. And so Tony picked him up, stuck him on Fenner Brockway's lap and pulled up a chair next to him. So there was this wonderful image of Ben sitting on Fenner Brockway's knee being fed by Tony Benn. What a great memory for a child. So Tony then remained with Liberation and still was a member right to his unfortunate passing, and came to our anniversary event and has always been incredibly supportive of Liberation and of international causes and international justice. And so when we had many rallies in Trafalgar Square in support of many causes, and sometimes you take up causes and you realise this is going to be a long, hard road to fight, taking up a cause of justice, Tony would sort of reflexively stand on the plinth in Trafalgar Square and say, well, we stood here in 1964 when Mandela was imprisoned, and we were here long enough to see him come out of prison and go into South Africa House, and all those decades and decades of campaigning. And it's Tony's understanding of popular movements, what motivates people, and always seeing and searching for the good in people rather than the bad in people, that is something that I think we will always treasure and thank him for. In the Gulf War of 1990-1991, Tony was a very, very important parliamentary figure, and indeed went to Iraq to try and promote a peace process. Then later on, when the war with Iraq came up, helped to found the Stop the War Coalition, of which he was president. And as Mushtaq was saying, we have this appreciation of him at the Camden Centre a few weeks ago, and it was absolutely full for the whole evening, and the problem was shutting people up and getting them off the stage rather than anything else. But it was a marvellous evening, and the affection that there was for Tony right across the age, ethnic groupings, political thoughts and everything else was utterly extraordinary, and something that I will never forget. Last point I want to make is this. Tony used his position in Parliament in many ways, and it must have been extraordinarily difficult for him as a cabinet minister in the 1960s and 1970s, when he clearly had a lot of differences within the cabinet, but he was brilliant at the nuanced mixed message of saying what was really going on in cabinet without ever breaking any cabinet secrets. It was pretty obvious what he thought about lots of things. He always took the view that he had to stay in office to achieve the best he could, and I think we have a lot to thank him for, both of his time as early on as Postmaster General, later Industry and Energy Secretary, and the inspiration he gave to many in the workplace, engineering and other people, that it was possible for a government to make a difference. It was possible for a government to promote cooperatives, promote a different way of working, listen to workers' concerns. And others have heard me say this before, I've never forgotten the way that he handled the whole British Leyland, Rolls-Royce crisis and the public ownership of shipbuilding and engineering in the 1970s, when he went out of his way, not just to consult union leaderships who had often slightly different agendas from others, but to make sure that he was actually in touch with the shop stewards movement in all the factories in this country, and said, look, the way forward for industry in this country is actually to harness the skill, the ambition and the imagination of ordinary workers, of what they can achieve and what they can achieve in life. He was a man that believed in peace in the world, campaigned all his life for peace in the world, stood against apartheid, against nuclear weapons, stood against the H-bomb in the 1950s, and throughout his life was one that was a beacon for peace and justice in the world. And independence has brought many benefits to many people all around the world, but it's also brought a recolonisation through global commercial power, through global military power, and through the global arms industry. And those are the issues that we now have to grapple with. And if you read his diaries, particularly the last 5 to 10 years of diaries. These were issues that he was grappling with all the time, through Stop the War Coalition, through Liberation, through Third World Solidarity movements, for all kinds of things, where he was discussing these issues, essentially about the power and good of ordinary people to protect our planet, to stop wars, to bring about social justice, as against those who benefit from inequality, wars, and injustice within our society. And he taught me a fantastic amount in my life, and I'll be forever grateful for being a good friend to him throughout his life. It was one of the great pleasures of my life to have known him so well, and it's really nice that we're here tonight to celebrate his life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, and I think, as you mentioned very rightly, that he was fond of United Nations. He attended many meetings with me to say that we must empower the United Nations instead of empowering in unipolar world one country or other. Second thing which he always lacked was how and why non-alignment movement is no more active as it was active in 60s and 70s. And I know he had spoken to you and me many times, can we revive it? But I think the Third World has lost its leadership and visionary leadership. We wish and hope that one day they will start it again, because now unipolar world is going to become a multipolar world, we know that. But I think another thing which I just want to mention is, I met Tony Benn with many people during last 32 years, but I think he was very pleased to attend some of the Third World Solidarity meetings when Noam Chomsky spoke, or Joseph Stiglitz spoke, or Gore Vidal spoke. And I remember when Gore Vidal was brought in on a wheelchair, he said, can I sit next to him, and can I speak just before him? And we did that, and it is on our website. You can see a beautiful picture. But he was also very pleased to meet the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, Benazir Bhutto, which I introduced him at his home, and she used to live just on the other side of Hyde Park. So I will ask her, would you like to walk to Notting Hill Gate, and I'll take you there. And she was very pleased to do that all the time. And can I now invite, obviously, Right Honourable Hilary Benn, who was the Secretary of State in previous government. He is now Shadow Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government. He is a second son, I suppose, of Tony Benn. Steve is older than you, is it right? And then he's got a younger brother and a younger sister, whom I heard in your meeting, Hilary. I want to send from everybody, and there is quite few members of Third World Solidarity and supporters of Third World Solidarity, best wishes to all the family. Aman Khan, you will speak, but give me the time.
Don't talk down to me. I have a right to pay tribute to him.
Of course.
From a different angle.
But be patient.
Don't talk down to me. I'm as honorable as anyone else. That is the teaching, one of the teachings of
everybody else is quiet and you are speaking, interrupting in the meeting. So that is not an honorable thing to do. Can I ask Right Honourable Hilary Benn to speak on behalf of the family and everybody? Hilary Benn. Let's welcome.
Friends, first of all, thank you very much indeed for doing the memory of my late father the honour of holding this event this evening. Can I apologise because of family commitments? After I've spoken, I will have to leave. But he, I know, would be deeply touched by this gathering and by the things that those who've spoken, Khalid, Jeremy, and yourself, Mushtaq, that lovely poem that you read so beautifully. Since everyone else has said when they first met him, I suppose I should put on the record I first met my father in 1953 when I was born. And for him, he was a product of his childhood, as we all are, the world that we're brought into, what we're taught, what we discuss with our parents, my grandfather and my grandmother, and his views were formed by experience. And the same is true for all of us. And as my uncle said at his funeral, when he trained as a pilot in Rhodesia in the Second World War, he was sent out there to get his wings, he was appalled at the treatment of black Africans that he experienced for the first time in his life. And that had a very profound, left a very profound mark upon him. And as Jeremy said, when he was elected to Parliament in 1950 and the movement for colonial freedom was founded in 1954, he was one of those who signed up to support it, along with such figures as Michael Foot and Dick Crossman, Barbara Castle, Jenny Lee, and many, many other colleagues. And for him, the cause of colonial freedom was, for that century, as important as the fight against slavery had been. And he once wrote, he said, "Two flames have always burned in the human heart. The flame of anger against injustice and the flame of hope that you can build a better world." And I can think of no better description of what motivated him throughout his life. And one of my early memories, indeed many of my early memories, are of going on various demonstrations, holding my mum's hand or my dad's hand, as we would march to Trafalgar Square to protest against apartheid, to protest against some injustice around the world. And the thing we have to remember from this vantage point in history about that campaign is, well, colonial freedom we take for granted because the colonies in the end won their freedom. They were not granted. In the end it was given begrudgingly, but that was not the case at the time, and it was a struggle. Really important that we remember our history, because Dad would always say that things that are in the end come to pass, which we then very quickly take for granted, did not come to pass because someday someone said, "Oh, I think it's a jolly good idea and I think I will make it happen." It's been a struggle. It's been a fight. It's been a campaign. People were locked up. People were executed for campaigning for colonial freedom. Indeed, he once wrote, he said he had a great sense of humour, as you know. He said, "I've been interested in all the people we, i.e. the British, locked up. I met Gandhi once." He did, when he was young. We locked him up. I met Nehru. He was locked up. Mandela was locked up. Kenneth Kaunda from Zambia was locked up. We locked up Nkrumah.
Yeah.
Now that is a reminder of our colonial history and the movement for colonial freedom, which then became liberation. And I want to thank your party parliamentary group on Third World Solidarity, you Mushtaq, for organising this evening. Have kept that flame, the burning flame against injustice, the burning flame that believes that we can build a better world alive, because that is the process by which millions and millions and millions of people around the world had the chance finally to elect their own government, to hold their government to account, and to determine their own future, and not to have it determined by others around the world. And one by one, those countries achieved their freedom. He fought a particular campaign in support of the late and great Seretse Khama, who was the first African I ever remember meeting as a young child. Now, Seretse Khama, as you may know from Botswana, had committed the cardinal sin. Well, he committed many sins. One, campaigning for colonial freedom for his country. Two, he had had the temerity to marry a white woman. And the British government at the time thought this was so scandalous that he was exiled from his own country. And he came to seek shelter in Britain, and he was a regular visitor to Holland Park Avenue, Seretse Khama. But in the end, he prevailed, and he was, of course, the first president of an independent Botswana. And his story left a great mark on me, and of course on my father and our whole family, because when you meet someone and you hear about what has happened to them, and then you see the outcome, it builds confidence in you that change itself is possible. And I wanted also to say in his absence to Khalid that the point that Khalid made about Parliament being a place where those who have the privilege to be members of Parliament could express solidarity with those who are in struggle. That those of us who are members of Parliament can add our voices to the voices of those outside this building who are in struggle. That is part of the reason that we are here. It is part of our responsibility as members of Parliament is to give voice to that expression, because that too is part of the process of change. And as Dad would often say, when that first voice expresses a view that has never been heard before, whether it is the cry for universal education, whether it is freedom for the countries of the world, by and large, people start by ignoring you. And when you get a bit louder and other people join their voices with yours, then they start to criticise you. And if you get more powerful, they say, you're really dangerous. This is a very dangerous idea that you're advocating.
Yeah.
But the whole of human history, the whole history of struggle and progress, is that gradually, if it's a good idea and it wins enough support, it wins the day. And then, and this is the ultimate truth, 5, 10, 15 years later, you can't, as Dad would say, you couldn't find anyone who wasn't in favour of the idea in the first place. But that is a reminder of where we have come from, the struggle that was involved, and where we ended up. And I think it is quite fitting, actually, that the last speech that my father ever gave in public was over in Westminster Hall in December of last year, where he came to take part in the memorial event for Nelson Mandela, because we had our tributes in the House of Commons, in which I was able to take part, and then Dad came to Westminster Hall and spoke about the cause that has brought us together this evening. And the very final thing I want to say about him is he was a socialist and a proud socialist, but he also was an inheritor of what was a radical, dissenting political tradition. As he wrote in his diaries, his mum, my grandmother, taught him that you should pay more attention to the prophets than you do to the kings. She was a great Bible scholar, and he was profoundly influenced by the place of faith in the world. And his father, William, who ironically had been the Secretary of State for India between 1929 and 1931, which was the cause of Dad meeting Gandhi when he was a young child, taught him many things. One of the things he taught him were these words of a famous Salvation Army hymn, which I think best sums up what Dad believed in and why he was as he was. And those words very simply say, and it was the title of one of his books, dare to be a Daniel. Dare to stand alone. Dare to have a purpose firm. Dare to make it known. And for me, those 4 lines sum up what my father's life was devoted to, was all about, because he absorbed those words and the meaning that they bring and brought to him and to us at a very young age, and the rest of his life he tried to live those out. And I am, on behalf of the whole of the family, incredibly grateful to all of you for coming this evening, for the comradeship that you showed him throughout his life, because it's about supporting one another in struggle, the good times, the bad times, and I know he appreciated that enormously, and we are greatly touched as his family by the many kindnesses that have been expressed since he died, for the kindness that you bestow upon him this evening by gathering for this memorial event, and to wish you all of the best in the fights and the struggles and the victories that are to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hilary, and don't you feel that you are the only family, 4 children and then many grandchildren, and I have read his 35 letter to his grandchildren, and they are also very visionary, and everybody should read them, in which he says that we are not leaving the world which our grandchildren deserve to live in, but I know that they have the vision, they have the ability and power, they need a will to do it. So I remember those words, and I hope you will read it. I've got many stories which I will be writing in my memoir. It will be coming out next year, Aitzaz, and I will be writing it first in Urdu and then in English. Take our best wishes, but can I invite Aitzaz? Yes, you can. Thank you very much. And to speak on behalf of
MP Hilary,
on people of Pakistan.
In your presence.
Pardon?
By your father. Only 2 sentences I want to speak.
Okay.
By your dad.
Okay.
It is my tribute that he transcended all the continents, and at times I feel he was not of this world. And I think before his sight, United Nations was founded in London, nearby. Once I heard, he was humble, the humblest luminary And I think it is an omission by the United Nations General Assembly, the General Assembly, because it is consisting of all previous colonial states. Now they claim to be independent politically. They should hold a meeting of reference for this greatest luminary of the present times, who combines the spirit of Spartacus, the spirit of Prometheus, and spirit of Martin Luther King, and the spirit of Nelson Mandela the Great, and Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. We salute him. I call upon the United Nations General Assembly to hold a meeting of reference and reverence for the greatest son of the present times and of the 20th and 21st century, the great Tony Benn, because he supported my brother against his for a struggle against for the liberation of the bonded slave and serfs and children. And last, one thing I would like to say, that I salute him that he rejected the regalia of the imperial regalia. At the same time, he challenged the imperialist regalia. Imperial regalia and imperialist regalia. Long live Tony Benn.
I have already said. Just a minute.
I have to go. Sorry, I have to go now.
Fine.
Okay,
thank you very much. Thank you. I think I have announced it to Amanullah Khan Sahab that United Nations is never going to do the reference. You can demand, but we have already announced that Third World Solidarity will hold a lecture next year. Just a minute, sir. Let me speak now.
Yeah.
When you were speaking, I was not interrupting. Did I? So we have already announced that next year, on our anniversary, which will be 29th anniversary of Third World Solidarity in April, in between 10th and 20th of April, we will hold a Tony Benn lecture. I hope you will support it. And can I now invite Barrister Aitzaz, the opposition leader in the Senate, and he is going to speak on behalf of people of Pakistan for Tony Benn this evening. Barrister Aitzaz.
Mr. Lasharie, ladies and gentlemen, after such profound speeches culminating in Hilary's speech as the son and heir of the tradition and legacy of Tony Benn, and after the passionate speech by Mr. Amanullah Khan, there seems to be nothing left. And I think, first of all, I think Mr. Mushtaq Lasharie is capable of doing amazing things, including this of holding a meeting in memory of Tony Benn in the Margaret Thatcher Room of this building. There is an irony in that, but I think the irony should be used to actually pronounce and further sharpen the image and the memory of Tony Benn. I remember him from my early days as a student, as an undergraduate in Cambridge. Cambridge was a radical campus. Cambridge was a radical campus in the 60s. Oxford was the conservative campus. We, the undergraduates, had a great admiration even in our student days and our young days for Tony Benn. This is also the irony coming out. In the Margaret Thatcher Room, you can only but in our time as students, we were deeply impressed and moved by Tony Benn taking up causes of the third world, because we were all from, mostly our circles were either from the third world or devotees of Professor Robinson at Cambridge, who taught us Marxist theories and thought. And in that time, which is a time when radicalization and radicalism had, by today's standards, a benign meaning. Today's standards, the whole concept of radicalism and radical and radicalization has changed. In those times, radical was the left, the socialist, the Marxist, the person thinking of an international, a new international order, a secular political entity was radical. Now, it just so happens that radicalization and radical has taken a sharp turn to the right, and we talk of radicalization as if it is the radicalization of the, say, the Muslims, or the radicalization of the Christian right, the radicalization of India, of the Hindu BJP in Hindutva, extreme right-wing religious persuasions and practices have become the norm of radicalization and the definition of radicalization. Compared to these, the radicalization of the 60s and the 70s was a benign concept. But the West, and the Imperial West in particular, was sharply arrayed and had taken up formations for the complete elimination of that radical by people like Fidel Castro and Che Guevara. And Che Guevara and his image became an abiding image of radical youth. But today's radicals are somewhat different, and Tony Benn would certainly look upon them, I think, with a certain amount of concern, although the radicals of the 60s, 70s and the 80s were ones who would be patronized by Tony Benn. But Tony Benn was not just a good listener, and he did not just listen to the faint and feeble voices of the third world. He articulated their aspirations. And that was what made Tony Benn, Tony Benn. A politician concerned about the sufferings of people across the globe, is the true humanist. From the historical center of, I say historical center of imperialism, he stood for the colonies and the oppressed people in the colonies. He contradicted himself in some respects. He fought against himself and his own identity, his own people. But he fought with the strength of ideas. And the ideas that Tony Benn sired, the ideas that he disseminated, the ideas that he articulated are the ideas that we must carry forth and carry on with beyond his life. He is no longer with us, but his ideas are. and ideas do not die with people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ahsen Saab. As I said, Tony Benn has written many books. I hope you will be able to write many books. Also, you are very busy and you have written a beautiful book, Indus Saga. And actually, I know the story behind it. Why did you write it? But I hope you will write many more on your experiences, because I think you were the youngest member of cabinet in Punjab, graduating from Cambridge and becoming minister in 1976. And I think you stood for principle, and we are looking for people like yourself and others. As you said very rightly, I met through Tony Benn, Harold Wilson. How many of people here met him after he retired, because he was forced to retire. And he was someone who was actually by MI5 and CIA painted as a member of KGB. Now it has been proven, written, many documentaries have been made that he was proven by MI5 and CIA, and the military of Britain was ready to talk about in 1964. There was a coup coming up, and we have seen many. So I think when you speak of these leaders, we must read the history, that when you stand up for some reason, people call you crazy, because you are one of few. When you are successful, they say you are a visionary. I mean, you are further successful in our part of the world, they said you are lucky. So I think Tony Benn was one of the luckiest persons, a visionary and who stood for principle. I know we are going to have lectures and many things, and I am writing, as I said, a lot of things about him, because I spend hours and days with him, because he was living nearby, and he always attended, and I think he had a hope. And I think Hilary said very rightly that hope is a biggest weapon of us to fight against the depression of the new extremism and radicalization, which you mentioned very rightly, but I think we have to continue our fight. I know that it is already 15 minutes past 8 and people want to go home because it is a fasting month, and you saw some of you might be fasting. And I'm very thankful to Chaudhry Mahmood Saab. He made Dr. Amir Majid to come here. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, it is always very difficult at last moment, but I managed to bring him in through a different door, and you as well. So anybody who wants to say something, just one or two, because this is our tradition. I don't want to finish the meeting without allowing you to say something if you want to. Dr. you want to say something? I know you said, I don't want to speak today, and we welcomed you. Anybody? I want to say something?
Yes.
Let Dr. say something, and then Nahid.
Just one sentence that I used to write emails to him, to Tony Benn, because I luckily had a personal email, and I used to say, an angel remembered, and I thought I was the only one. But when I saw the Guardian video, which was produced in his memory, the video has on it, and you can find it on the internet, a priest saying that in his church, somebody started to light the cigar. And who was that? Tony Benn. He said, I did not have the courage to ask a prophet not to do it. Prophet. So he was a prophet to many people. He was literally indeed. And I was not the only one, many people believe that. And that's what I want to say.
Thank you very much, Dr. As the Secretary of Pakistan People's Party, and thank you for...
Thank you. I like to stand up to speak.
Thank
you very much. It's indeed an honor and a privilege to be standing here amongst all these great people, and to be paying tribute to a great son of our times, Tony Benn. He was a friend of people. He was a friend of many movements, and today Palestinians feel orphaned indeed. as he's not there to raise his voice at BBC. The way he ripped the BBC apart in one of his very famous interviews is a legend and is an inspiration. And I have actually shared that clip with all my children to see how he sidelined the BBC reporters or the anchor person, and he just took the courage and read all that he had to read. That is all I really wanted to say. There is so much that you could carry on, but it's all been said before me. Thank you very much.
Aman, you want to finish the meeting by saying something?
Yeah, I just want to say, indeed I am impressed by the performance of the Third World Solidarity, that today they are making history by paying tribute to one of the greatest luminary of the 20th and 21st century, the great Tony Benn, who rejected the imperial as well as imperialistic regalia. You live in England, try to understand English. He is the gentleman who left the crown and he joined the masses. People of and leaders of Pakistan must learn from him. You cannot find one penny illegally on the name of Tony Benn. But whereas in Pakistan people are looting and looting and looting and bringing money to Fort Knox and to this country and to European countries. People of your country are dying, starving. Tony Benn was speaking for the people of
for
the people of
things going on around us.
For the people of
You are so emotionally charged that
the people of
let everybody know that you are here.
Young lady, you are smiling. You haven't seen hunger. You haven't seen the smile on the face of Spartacus. You know who Spartacus was? You don't know. If you know slavery, you know Spartacus.
Who fought against Romans?
I
First revolution.
salute his Promethean, my barrister friend. He is my class fellow. We studied on the same table. I salute the Promethean as well as the Spartan, the spirit of Spartacus, and a gentleman who was a giant of knowledge. I think Britain has lost a great scholar. When he said the United Nations General Assembly, I didn't say Security Council. I just care to who's for the Security Council, except two members of them, you know, Russia and China and maybe Britain, because I'm also a British citizen. General Assembly must pay him tribute to this son, because he was a great man. You know, being a British, being a very rich person, he declassed himself. Whereas you look at the leaders of Pakistan, वो सब खुशामद में है, कलम बिक गया है, कैमरा भी बिक गया है, आंखें भी बिक गई हैं, सियासत भी बिक गई है, जुल्फ़िकार अली भुट्टो की कुर्बानी को भी भूल गए।
Thank you very much. As I said, we will remember him. We will carry on working for his cause. We will be there to work with many other comrades. Yes,
can I just make two quick announcements? Do you mind?
Please.
Liberation's annual meeting is on July the 26th, which is Saturday week at the St Pancras Church Hall just next to Euston Station, starting at 11:30. And obviously, you're very welcome. There's going to be discussion there with Georgia Hannes, the former South African High Commissioner to Britain, about Africa and globalisation of African politics. And then, very important for us, we're organising a big conference on November the 22nd at the Resource Centre, which is on Holloway Road near Holloway Tube Station, on Africa and the effect of global corporations and what they're doing to Africa and the post-independence movements, the sort of stuff I was talking about during my tribute to Tony afterwards. You're all more than welcome to both events, and if I may, Mushtaq, I'll pass on the details to you so perhaps you could circulate them to everybody. We're trying to ensure that there is a serious discussion about the situation facing all African countries, and obviously the speakers will be from different African countries and issues, but in particular talking about the role of the Organisation of African Unity, or African Unity as it's now called, in bringing about social justice throughout the whole continent. Thank you very much.
Jeremy, another thing, there is a meeting, a big conference organised by class to launch the Labour Party and labour movement in this country in TUC on 1st of November. I'm pretty sure you will be there, and I will be, and I have invited about 10 to 12 comrades from Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. They will be coming here, and we will be having a lunch on Sunday, the next day. 1st of November is Saturday, 2nd of November is Sunday, with many friends from Unite, Unison, and GMB.
On the 1st of November, yeah.
Yeah, we will try to do that as well. And another announcement, I know there is a, now finish. There is another announcement, Faiz Mela is happening this year, and I know a lot of Pakistani would love to come on 30th of August this year, and it is next to Houston, so anybody who want to come and do come. We will continue working for the causes of Tony Benn, which are very dear to us. And I think it is very important that we bring the people from around the world, from Africa, from Asia, from Middle East, who are standing for these principles. I think they are needed, they are very important. Wherever we can do that, we should continue doing it. Thank you very much once again for coming and spending this evening with us. Special thanks to the media people who are here, who are going to report it. This will be on YouTube, and anybody who wants to listen to these speeches, and this, let me know, we will send you the link. Can I say thank you to all those who have sat passionately and peacefully in the audience. A big clap to you. And let's look forward to Jeremy Corbyn sitting among us. As we will sit here. If you pull your
always
chair.
Amongst you, you might.
Of course I know. Come next to me, and people who are there can come around us to have a group photo with the banner.